Call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's June 10th, 2020. As chairman of the Budget Review Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing access to the meeting by telephone, additional access by video or other electronic means. The number to connect is 408-418-9388. And the access number is 712-759-664. If for some reason you have a problem connecting, you may call 603-821-2049 and you will have help connecting. We had previously given notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting through public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashua's website at www.nashuanewhampshire.gov and publicly noticed at City Hall and the Public Health Department. If anybody has a problem accessing the meeting, we will have to suspend the meeting and schedule it another time. In the event the public we're going to start the meeting now by taking the roll. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Please also state the reason that you couldn't attend and if you can hear all the proceedings. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman at-large Shauna Kelly.
Here. I'm alone. I can hear everyone.
Michael O'Brien is
Social distance.
Alderman at-large Laurie Wiltshire.
I am here, I am alone, and I am social distancing, and I can hear everyone.
Yeah, and my apologies, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to mention that I am alone. I can hear and I'm practicing the social distancing. Thank you. Alderman Jettie.
I'm here, I'm alone, I can hear you, and I'm obeying the governor's order to stay home.
Alderman Schmidt.
I am present. I can hear the proceedings. I am alone and I'm following the governor's directive for distancing.
Alderman at-large Ben Clemons.
Thank you. I am here. I am alone and I am obeying the governor's order and I can hear everyone. Thank you.
And Chairman Richard Dowd.
Yes, I can hear the proceedings. I am alone and I'm practicing social distancing in accordance with the governor's order. Also in attendance, we have the mayor, Attorney Clark. I believe we have, who else is on?
Alderman Lopez is twinning with Alderman Dowd.
Okay.
Alderman Laws is here as well.
Alderman Tenth.
This Clee.
Yeah.
Alderman
All
Cleaver.
right, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have it. I have Alderman Tensis, Alderman Cleve, Alderman Harry Gathright, Alderman Cleaver, Alderman Laws, Alderman Lopez. Any other aldermen I did not mention? Forever hold your tongue. There you go.
As I said, we have the mayor, we have John Griffin, and I see Deputy Chief Walker, Chief Rhodes. So we will proceed. So Alderman O'Brien, communications?
There is none.
Unfinished business?
There is none.
New business resolutions?
Before us this evening is R 20-040. authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to borrow from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services State Revolving Loan Fund an additional amount not to exceed $2,500,000 for pump station upgrades. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, we just heard public hearing on that and a full explanation of it. Is there anybody on the city side that would like to add anything to that? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. Any discussion? None?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. I just want to say that this is, it's a lot of money, $2.5 million, but it seems like a very necessary thing. It's not something that we really have much choice about. And the fact that it's being borrowed from the state at 2% interest, it seems like an opportunity for us to upgrade our wastewater pumping system that the city is very dependent upon, and the fact that it's coming from the state at a low interest rate, makes it a very palatable situation. So,
Thank you. Alderman Ryan?
Thank you. And I would like to echo, Mr. Alderman Jettie brought up a very good point. And the mayor could possibly back this up. Many of you may or may not remember last summer, but the pumping station up in the Broad Street area, one of the pumps did fail. So we were relying heavily on that one pump, and both pumps were installed at the same time. And if that pump went, I think we would have had really, truly a problem in trying to get rid of some of the waste. So this is a duly needed. Sounds like some areas where they are relying on one pump, they've got to get two. That's something, because when you have two pumps, that can split the load difference between the two. So this is money well spent. It's one of those hidden problems nobody really wants to discuss when you come down to the waste issue. But I agree with Mr. Boucher that this is definitely needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Waving.
Excuse me?
I'm waving.
Alderman Lopez. Yes, you have to turn your camera on when you wave.
Oh, sorry. So I just wanted to remind the board, I know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, we're looking at everything we can do to reduce the tax burden on taxpayers, and that we are super conscious of our expenses because we're worried about the economic fallout that's coming around that corner. But I just want to remind everybody what Alderman Dean used to say: you can run a city as long as you have garbage, wastewater treatment, and some police officers there to take care of it all. So this is not an area where we want to cut back.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, Alderman O'Brien, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
yes.
Alderman Wiltshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 7 yeas, 0 nays.
So the motion carried, and R20-040 will be recommended to the full board for final passage. Next item, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R-20-041, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the mayor and the Board of Fire Commissioners of the City of Nashua, New Hampshire, and Local 789 of the International Association of Firefighters from July 1st 2019 through June 30th, 2023, and authorizing a related transfer and supplemental appropriation. Mr. Chairman,
Alderman O'Brien,
situation, I am not going to make a motion.
thank you.
Uh,
I understand. Alderman Clemons?
Yes, I would make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, Alderman Clemens makes a motion to recommend final passage to the full board. Discussion. Alderman Wiltshire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am really struggling with this contract, and I spoke to John McAllister and I believe to Don Davidson about the contract. They are worthy. They do deserve this contract. The problem is that right now the city can't afford this contract. It's not because I don't want to vote for it or support it, because I do. But I think fiscally, I just can't see my way to supporting it, even though I believe in it. I think it's a good contract. I don't think we can afford it as a city right now.
Thank you, Alderman Wiltshire. Anyone else would like to speak to the motion?
Mr. Chair, could I offer
Mayor?
thoughts?
Sure.
Well, I mean, I appreciate everything that the chief and Mr. McAllister said regarding the contract. And of course, it is a difficult issue I know that you're struggling with. I wanted to let you know that today, this morning, we got another financial shock that will make a very difficult period of several years far more difficult. What we learned this morning via some kind of press release, which was circulated, I believe, to you from John Griffin, is that the state is raising the city's obligation to pay for pensions by $3 million. And that's an estimate, and I can explain how it's arrived at. But this is more than a 10% increase in pension costs. This will be imposed beginning fiscal 22. In other words, the year after the budget you're considering right now. I've already talked about the difficulties we're going to have because of this unknown consequences of the deepest recession, the highest unemployment that the country has had in 100 years. The healthcare costs, which are trending up at 9% a year, and I digress to say we absolutely have to get the plan design changes into every, in addition to the unaffiliated employees, which are the only ones with the plan design changes now. We really need that in all employee groups if we want to, so-called bend the curve on these healthcare costs. Otherwise, we might be faced with $2 and $3 million increases forever. Now, what we learned then is on top of the healthcare increase, in addition to the recession, in addition to the value that's being lost as a result of utilities being reduced in value on their assessments, we now get a $3 million additional bill. And the way that comes about, and we could get into the details, some of you are familiar with the last time it happened because you were here the last time, but it comes in the form of a reduction in the assumed rate of return by the state pension board. Last time that this happened was in 2016. We were hit at that point with a $2.3 million increase, over and above the increases caused by wage increases, etc. And we planned for years as to how to handle it. And yes, we absorbed it, but yes, it resulted in higher taxes. This time, again, because the wage base is a little higher, and because of reasons that Mr. Griffin can explain, it's going to be higher than 2.3 million. We think somewhere in the vicinity of $3 million. I just can't say strongly enough that, that caution is really necessary right now in terms of any major expenditures. We have, I'll just review quickly again, the healthcare issue. We have potential labor contracts. We have the normal increases. We have 11,000 kids who are, many of whom are behind because they've been out of school for 6 months or will be come September. And now $3 million increase. The people who were here 4 years ago, 5, 6 years ago on the Board of Aldermen, and those in the legislature who tried unsuccessfully, because you can't get anywhere in the legislature with this, to address the underlying issue here, understand this and have dealt with it. All of you have not, though. But this is a $3 million increase, which will, get us absolutely nothing. No increase in services, nothing except for higher taxes. It was one of those fall out of your chair kind of notices. I did have time to call a couple of the members of the Board of Aldermen about this, but I can't say strongly enough that this is a time when caution is really necessary if we don't want to see major tax increases or significant service cuts in the.
Anyone else that would like to speak? Alderman Schmidt? And
Thank you,
Alderman,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
We know that we're in a hard place right now. What happens if we decline to pass this tonight? What happens with the firemen?
If the Budget Committee does not approve the legislation, it goes to the full board with a negative recommendation.
And follow up?
Go ahead.
Do we expect that the fire department will come back with a new contract?
Not for, it's going to be heard, it'll go to the full board on the 23rd. And if it fails, if it passes there, it'll depend on what the mayor does with it. If it fails, it goes back to the fire commissioners for continued negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that's the way it is. I didn't see Attorney Clark disagreeing.
Yeah, well,
Alderman,
I would
yes.
just add to that, Mr. Chair, that as you've asked us, we have formed a negotiating committee that consists of Ms. Clark, Ms. Kleiner, and others in City Hall who are trying to work with all of the departments to institute some level of uniformity between these contracts and make changes that are necessary, like the plan design. Now, the last steps of the fire contract were not communicated to that group before they were agreed to, but in reality, we really need to have a single group of people who is working on negotiations across all contracts so that, there aren't these sudden surprises or, way out of context contracts that come to the Board of Aldermen.
Alderman Cleaver?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel that this is absolutely necessary. Firemen, they deserve it. They've negotiated in good faith. These circumstances, as described, are dire, no doubt about it. We've got to find a way to pay these guys, men and women, and give what they deserve. They're way behind the curve as far as income is concerned. They should have this without a doubt. I strongly recommend passing. Find a way to pay for it.
Anyone else that would like to speak?
Yes, Alderman Harry Gaffney.
Yes, Yes,
I agree
Alderman
with-
Cartwright and then Juddy. Go ahead.
I agree with Alderman Cleaver. And I'm not sure personally how to make that happen. And I've heard conversations about the state, and we have 5 state representatives on this board. And I have to believe that at least one of those 5 know what we need to do at a state level that might be able to help the situation as well. So my conversation basically is to my colleagues at the state level as to what we might be able to do to help with the situation. And we're meeting tomorrow, so we all can talk tomorrow. It doesn't have to be in this venue. But I just wanted to throw that out.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Juddy, then Alderman Clee.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I looked at the agreement that's being proposed, and it calls for 3.5% as a cost of living increase for the next 4 years. 3.5% each year, an increase. Now, when I look at the cost of living increase, the actual cost of living for this area, the increase has been averaging less than 2%. I think I figured it out to be 1.87%. The previous contract had increases of in 2016 of 2.1%, 2017 2.1%, 2018 1.9%, 2019 2.3%, for an average of 2.1%. So around the 2%. And speaking to, I had a conversation today with John McAllister, the president of the Firefighters Union, and I also read the letter from Michael O'Brien Jr., who's the vice president. And what they're saying is that they're not just looking for a cost of living increase. What they're looking for is they want to be compensated additionally. They feel that there is a disparity between what they're being paid and what the police department is being paid, and they're not looking to, they say, to close that gap completely, but they want to move towards closing that gap. So the question is, are the firefighters being paid appropriately or not? And I really have no idea, but I looked at the city of Manchester and what they're paying their firefighters, and they're paying their firefighters less than what we're paying ours. And in Manchester, the increases for 2018 are 1.5%, 2019 2%, 2020 2%. I looked at the city of Portsmouth, and again, the Portsmouth pays their firefighters less than, overall less than what we pay ours. And their cost of living increases are tied to the rate of inflation. And, they don't set out a percentage ahead of time. It's based upon the 10-year average of the cost of living increase for this area. And for the past 10 years, that's been 1.87%. And the Portsmouth contract says that their cost of living increase will be no less than 2%, no more than 5%, but it will be tied into the CPIU for the Boston, Cambridge, Newton, New Hampshire area, which has been, the 10-year average. So they're looking, it's been less than 2%, so they're looking at a 2% increase. So the 3.5 that our firefighters are looking for is not just a cost of living increase. They're saying that what they're being paid to begin with is less than what it should be. It's unfair. But in my short look at trying to look at comparative fire departments like Manchester and Portsmouth, I see that they pay their firefighters less than we pay ours. They also pay their firefighters less than what they pay their policemen. So, I hear what the firefighters are saying, and I appreciate the danger that they face every day. In my career, I have dealt with lawsuits involving people who have been harmed by toxic substances like asbestos, for example, to which our firefighters are exposed every day, and I know that their job is dangerous. They have a much higher risk of cancer than the normal population because of the toxic substances that they are exposed to. But as a representative of the taxpayers, I have to look at, are we paying our firefighters appropriately? And I can't look at the dangers that they're facing and the safe station work that they've done. I have to look at how do they compare with other similar fire departments. Manchester has a safe station program that just like we do, and yet they're paying their people less. So on that little short analysis of, I come to the conclusion that we are paying our firefighters appropriately, and they're certainly entitled to a cost of living increase, but where the cost of living, the inflation rate is less than 2%, for them to be asking for 3.5% seems a stretch to me, especially in light of the constraints that we're facing with our budget. So my apologies to the firefighters, but I cannot support their request to approve this contract.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Chairman Dowd. I, I'm at a loss of words here, and I apologize. The truth is that when we're looking at our budget and our budget shortfalls and everything like that, it's easy to say, well, we shouldn't and we can't and so on. I don't want to compare the fire to the police. They're two separate entities, and we need to treat them differently. I think our firefighters are worth the additional, and I don't think there's anybody here who has said anything different. I don't know where we would come up with the money. I know we can't increase the taxes, but I think we need to seriously look at, what can we do? We cannot negotiate. This is not for us to negotiate. It's for us to give an up or down vote. I would hope that we will try to think about it a little bit harder and work towards it. I think they deserve it. I think over the past years, and I thank Alderman Jettie for pointing out that the firefighters in Manchester don't get anything extra. I don't agree that they shouldn't get anything extra. I think that they should, but that's a Manchester issue. I was quite proud when Chief Rhodes made the comment that we would become I think he referred to it as a class 1 or of some sort like that. And that's because we have loyal firefighters. We have hardworking firefighters. And I just want to keep all that in mind when we say that this is way above the cost of living. And I can't disagree with that. It is what it is, and that's a bare fact. But I'd like us to consider it a little bit more and perhaps try to find out if there would be possibility of where we could pull some funds. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Alderman Clemons.
thank you. So I am in support of the contract. You know, a point was made earlier comparing the fire department of Manchester and Portsmouth to Nashua. And, you know, it was said that the Manchester and Portsmouth fire departments get paid less than the firefighters here in Nashua. And, you know, that might be true. But when I look at things, you know, I about pay and equality and things like that, I look at it like, well, what is fair? What is a fair wage? And, you know, just because you compare one municipality in New Hampshire to another does not mean that you're comparing something fairly. And I'll use the example of if you have an employee that works at a Walmart, for example, and then you have somebody that works at a Target doing a similar job, you might say one of them pays one of them, you know, 50 cents more an hour. But the real question is either one of those companies paying the worker the correct rate of pay? And so when I look at the comparison to Nashua to other cities, I mean, that's a fair thing to look at, I suppose. But the real question is are any of those cities paying the firefighters what they should be paid? And I can say for one that Nashua has the best fire department in all of New England. And we are very lucky to have the force that we have. And, you know, they do deserve to have a contract that does move forward and close the gap between what they make and what the police officers make. I truly do believe that. Because again, it's a life-saving and while they are different, and I agree with what Alderman Clee said, we should treat them differently too. We still have to look at the fact that, you know, they're out there and they're doing jobs that are difficult, that you need special training to do, and these men and women put their lives on the line for us day in and day out. And so for me, you know, I think it's very easy to just say, well, we can't afford this. Much harder to come to the table and figure out a way that we can afford it. And, you know, I think about what former Mayor Davidson and Fire Commissioner Davidson said, where it's, you know, if we were to do this, it's an extra for the 500,000, it's an extra 5 cents on the per $1,000 in taxes. And I think about that, and I think about who's saying it too, because if you've been around Nashua as long as I have, Mayor Davidson was a conservative guy, and the fact that he's here advocating for this contract and is saying that this contract is fair is something that we need to take into consideration as well. because that's a voice that, quite frankly, I didn't expect to come out and be for something like this. So while I appreciate the fact that we are going to have hard times ahead, while I appreciate the fact that we got an unexpected cost, I'll end it with what Chief Rhodes says or had said earlier. It's never a good time for the fire department. And as long as I've been in city government, since 2008, that's been the case. Time and time again, I've seen contracts come before this board and be rejected or be vetoed by the mayor, different mayor, but still, it's like it's never a good time for them. And I think that I think the time has come that we bridge the disparity here, take the leap of faith, and do the right thing, which to me is approve this contract. So thank you.
Okay, Alderman Clee, did you want to be heard again?
Yes, if you don't mind, thank you so much, Chairman Dowd. One of the things that I had wanted to say when I was having my little brain spasm there and couldn't find my words, was to acknowledge what the mayor had spoken about that $3 million being hit in 2022, 2023. Time and time again, the state continues to shift costs down to us. And this isn't necessarily a shifting cost, it's an actuary change. But this is all because of a shifting cost, because of them reneging on what they had said that they would do so many years ago. And while this is still within the same subject, relative to what Alderwoman Harriet Gathright had pointed out, this is something that's going to have to get changed in the state. And for the past few years, I know we have worked to try to make those changes. We have tried to get the state to pick up what they had promised, the 35%, not necessarily that, maybe 5%, 10%, 15%. It gets vetoed by the governor time and time again. This is truly, without me doing a political thing here, but this is truly where your vote counts. We have to stop shifting this cost down to the municipalities. And we have to send a message to the state that it's time for them to do what they originally had promised that they would do. And I think it was back in 2010, around 2010, 2012, when they started pulling the funds away. They slowly started going I think down from 12%, and it's at the 35% under the 12%. Finally, we're now to 0% that the state is picking in. I know we've been trying to get it, instead of having to fund it for 100% this retirement, we've been trying to get it down to like 85% is what that fund needs to be done. We're still working hard on it. I continue to work hard on it, as does Alderwoman Harriet Gathright, Alderman Schmidt, Alderman O'Brien, et cetera, and Alderman Cleaver. We continue to do this. We will continue to fight. We can't make any promises. But that is something that will come at us in 2022. We're now looking at the 2021 budget, I believe we are looking at. And I think we need to look at this year and prepare for the following year, but we can't punish those of this year because of what the state is doing. We have to try to find something. So at that, I will stop talking. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing no one, I'll talk. I've been going back and forth on this contract for quite some time. I fully appreciate and support our local fire department, and always have and always will. And, do they deserve the money that they're asking for? Yes. The problem is, as chair of budget, and I'm looking at the numbers and I'm looking at the things that are before us, I just have a problem with the current structure of the contract. As you know, in this year, 2020, we're going to have to do a supplemental appropriation, which is going to take, so if we pass this contract it's going to take 10 votes of the board aldermen to pass it because we would be doing a supplemental appropriation for 2020. Also, in 2021 funds, we have been trying to do what we could to lower the tax implications to the 10,000 people in Nashua that are unemployed right now. Now, yes, they will probably get their jobs back over the course of 2021, we're hoping. Sooner the better. But that still leaves them very short on paying their bills. And particularly when it comes to paying their bills to the city. Having had discussions with Treasurer Fredette is concerned about when we get to next July, who can pay their tax bill, especially if there's a significant increase. And of course, anybody that pays through their bank, their escrow funds are going to go up to pay the taxes. I would like to see the contract restructured, which means that wouldn't be able to pass it the way it is currently. We put money back in the budget, and I worked with Alderman Clemons to put money back in the budget for 2021, so there'd be a decent amount of money in the contract for them for 2021. And I was all set for 22 and 23, and now we've got to go and fight the battle up in Concord again as they try to pass more funding issues down to us. And I think we're all getting a little tired of that. I can tell you that when I ran for Senate and I went out to all these little towns west of here, were getting hurt by this same thing with pensions. And they were at the end of their rope. I would imagine right now, they're all looking to work to change things up there as far as pensions are concerned. There's two things I think they need to do in pensions. One is these new numbers that they're talking about are ridiculous. And second, the fact that the state's not paying anything towards the pension fund after starting at 35% and working their way down to zero is, again, ridiculous. It's a state pension fund. And I think that we need to make changes in Concord of the people that are driving this down into the cities, especially Nashua, Manchester, Keene, and Portsmouth. You know, enough's enough. It's time to dig our heels in and change what's going on. No matter which way I vote tonight, I'm still torn, and I'm still open to listening and keeping an open mind. But I really wish that the contract could be restructured to make it easier on Nashua taxpayers than it is right now. I hate having to reappropriate monies from 2020 to try and up that amount. And there's just so many things happening right now that safe stations being pulled out. This new thing we just found out today about pensions is there's a lot of moving targets, and I don't feel comfortable right now, even though I fully support the firemen and fully support that they deserve the money and earn the money. I don't know how many times there've been calls that the firemen have gone to and saved lives because they're the first ones there. And there are accidents in the jaws of life. It's the firemen that run into the burning car and save the people. And we couldn't do without one of our trucks, one of our ladder trucks, because that's where all of that equipment is, or the guys that are on them. If we pass the contract and we don't add money to the budget, they can't pay for it. They would have to lay people off in the fire department. I don't think that we can handle that. That would not be good for the city. So that's my 2 cents on the contract. I fully support the union will do whatever it can to get them as well compensated as the city can afford. But right now, I'm conflicted over the amount of money we have versus the amount of money we're trying to spend. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Mr. Chairman?
Alderman Clemons.
Thank you. Do we still have the city treasurer or Mr. Griffin on?
Mr. Griffin's on.
I have a question. How much money do we have in unexpended fund balance?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, unassigned fund balance, Alderman Clemens?
Yes.
We, as you know, we grow that every year. And this past year, as of June 2019, we exceeded just over 30 million.
And I know that we have an ordinance that says we have to keep a minimum of 10% of that relative to the budget. Is that, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are correct. As a city ordinance, we exceed, the 30 million exceeds that number.
But do you know by approximately what dollar figure?
Subject to check, it's probably in the $3 million range.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, we could, because we're short, from what I understand, we're short $500,000 this year, and no, and that's next year. And then we're making a supplemental appropriation with this. Hypothetically, we could take some of that unexpended fund balance and pay these firefighters a decent wage. Is that not correct, or is that correct? Theoretically.
Mr. Chairman, the general fund the unassigned fund balance is the saving account for the city. It's scrutinized very strongly by the rating agencies, which fortunately we've been able to get 2 AAA ratings. They typically frown upon funding ongoing expenses with one-time savings or one-time revenue, but one-time savings. And as I indicated in my fiscal note, the 150 is not a material number. It's more that we haven't done it. And secondly, it's the ongoing requirements of the contract in years to come that are very uncertain. That's kind of the issue I see. I'm just thinking out loud here when Mayor Donchis and I and a few others craft his budget guidance, and I'm just struggling with the disparity that may occur with the mayor requesting another 2% or something, 1.5 from everyone, and then we have the unfortunate situation that Alderman Dowd indicated we can't afford to pay the contract that we approved. I'm just struggling with that, how to make that work.
Thank you for that. I respect your opinion very much. You do a fantastic job here in the city, but I'm not downplaying the out years or anything like that. I'm just wondering if, to me, there has to be a way that we can shift money around to make this work using that unexpended fund balance. Whether it's we spend the unexpended fund balance on something else and then move that money over here, and I don't know. I'm sure I'm sure that would be extremely transparent to anybody, even a bond rating agency as well. So, but nonetheless, we have we're in a situation right now where, yes, that money is our savings account, and yes, that money is there to make sure that we have a rainy day fund. If 2020 isn't a rainy day, I don't know what the definition of rainy day is. We need to be able to, in my opinion, I think that we can go and look at that as a place where we could potentially get the expenditure. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add that I've worked extensively with Treasurer Fredette on the bonding. When we have expenditures against the bond, we normally pay cash, and he buys the bonds at the most advantageous time. And I would not want to mess around with our bond rating, because that would cost us a lot more than we're talking about here. And a lot more. He's done a great job at keeping us with AAA ratings, and we're down in the 2% range for bonding. A lot of cities and towns can't even match that. So I'd be real hesitant spending that money. And then the other thing is, when you start taking this one-time money and applying it to help on this year, 2021, what happens is you transfer all this expense out to the future years. And how many people want to look at telling the citizens in Asheville, because another $3 million health insurance in 22 and a $3 million hit because the state wants more money, and all of a sudden your tax rate's at 5 or 6%. How many people want to live with that? I talked to the mayor today about, we have to look at more than 1 year's budgeting. It's because if we don't look at the next 2 to 3 years or more and try to plan out some of these expenditures, we're never going to be in a good position. So, but that's a side point. Anyway.
Mr. Chairman, can I follow up?
Okay, Alderman Clemons.
Yeah, so to your point, the other option, of course, and I've mentioned this before at previous budget meetings, is to bond is to instead of paying cash for something, is to bond it, because we have a AAA rating and because the interest rates are so low. That is another option that's in our wheelhouse that we could look at. And yes, it would cost interest to us, but the interest rate is so low that I think that I think it would be a good time, if we were going to do that, would be now. So we have, in my opinion, a couple of different ways that we can get this contract together and have the funds to do it.
Are you talking about bonding for salaries? Because that's not allowed.
No, what I'm talking about is bonding, for example, taking cash from that we were going to spend to buy, as an example, for some of the surf vehicles in public works, doing a 5-year bond on those collectively, and then taking the cash that we were going to spend for those vehicles and appropriating it to the fire department for the salary. So the salary would be paid for with cash, and the vehicles would be paid for with a loan.
Even if we contemplated that, we would not get that done before the 23rd of June. So I'm looking at asking for restructuring of the contract to get through 2021 and then help them out in 22, 23 and try to make them as whole as possible without causing so much disdain for the rest of the taxpayers in the city.
Well, I respectfully disagree.
That's why we're all here. We all can agree to disagree. Anyone else who would like to speak on R20-041? Just one additional thing, whichever way I vote tonight doesn't necessarily mean it'll be the way I vote at the full board meeting. Either way, I'm open to seeing if there are viable solutions, but in working with Mr. Griffin and Treasurer Fedette, it doesn't look good. And we have to be cognizant of the out years as well as the next year. Alderman Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're saying it doesn't look good. You mean as it is now, and if it were restructured, you would find it acceptable?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one, would the
I'm
clerk?
sorry, Alderman Dowd. Sorry.
Yes.
I had a couple of questions, just procedural questions.
Oh, all right. Alderman Kelly.
Thank you. Well, first I want to say that I do appreciate the fire department very much, and all that they've done. They stepped up when we needed them with safe stations, and they're out there every day. They do a fantastic job. So my questions are related to what would happen if we decided not to go forward with this and went to the board with a negative. Would they have to go all the way back through negotiations again?
If it goes to the full board with a negative recommendation, the full board can still pass it.
Sure. If it doesn't pass the full board.
No matter what we do, though, it's going to take 10 votes because the way it's structured right now, we have to use supplemental appropriation for 2020, and that will take 10 votes.
So my second question is,
Mr. Chair, I can answer that, I think, the question.
Oh, thank you. Yep.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, before there was sort of regular process negotiations going on. And we've gotten to the point where, as you've heard, there was mediation. And the next step after that is fact finding. This was all provided for under state law. And this is the course, there are negotiations, you reach impasse, you go to mediation, you go to fact finding. What a fact finding report does is gives you, a fact finder comes in and makes a independent evaluation of the situation and reports, and it becomes a public report regarding where the fact finder thinks the contract should settle, and how pay matches up, other kind of, all these issues. And then the city and the union can react to the fact finder's opinion and go from there. Negotiations could resume. The fact finder's report could be accepted by both sides. You don't know what's going to happen. So what happened was the fire commission just simply agreed, as without going through the city negotiating team, to the contract. But if the Board of Aldermen were not to pass this, I believe we would end up going back into the normal process and go probably to fact finding. Negotiations can always happen, but given where the parties are, we would probably go to fact finding, the next natural legal step in the negotiating process, and determine, and then we'd learn ultimately what the fact finder recommends.
Okay, thank you. That's a thorough answer. I appreciate that. My second question was, I know there were some changes made to the budget, somewhere around 245,000. I'm trying to remember exactly. Last week, I was under the impression that that was to help cover this. Is that for 1 year? Would it not cover it fully? I think my concern here is they very much deserve this raise, but if there isn't room in the budget, what happens to the fire department's budget?
I think I could answer that too, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor.
as my understanding is that we were asked the question, we, the city financial team, and John is on the, Mr. Griffin is on the call. So if I say anything that's inaccurate, please don't hesitate to correct me. But we were asked to come up with how much it would cost to fund, for example, a 2.5% raise for fiscal 20 and for fiscal 21. And there are two answers to that question. If you consider the step increases to be included in the increase in compensation, which is the way the teachers' raises are always reported, but not always the uniformed services. If you did that way, you really only need to add $51,000 to the fiscal 21 budget to be able to afford 2.5%, including step increase. If you wanted, but the second answer was that if the question was 2.5% cost of living, so to speak, plus the step increases, then then the cost of compensation goes up more than the 2.5 because you've got the step increases plus the 2.5. And the answer was that if to fund 2.5 plus the step increases, $245,000 would need to be added to the fiscal 21 budget. And that is what the budget committee recommended. Now, is that accurate? Let's just refer over to Mr. Griffin. And have I accurately recalled the numbers?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, John Griffin, CFO, that is accurate. How we determined that was we took the 438,000 that was put in contingency for negotiation for fiscal 20. We added the steps, 62,000, added another 389,000 for the percentage that the mayor indicated, and got a total value of 889,000. And with the mayor's cut of 500,621, that would leave the fire department with 644,000. So we needed to add the 245 to get to the 889. So that the mayor's articulation of how we derived that number was accurate.
So there is money in the 21 budget.
Okay.
There always was money in the 20 budgets at the indicated levels that Mr. Griffin was just talking about.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. If I think I can add a little bit more clarity.
Sure.
If I may, the 1.144 million on line number 51,900, that's the amount that's needed by the fire department to fund the current contract. To get down to no more than a 2.25% increase for the fire department, the mayor, it was a simple calculation. We needed to cut or reduce the budget by 500,621. When the board, when the budget committee put the 245 back, you're approaching the fundability of roughly a 2.5% increase with the 889. So it's that 255 that remains that's to cover the contract as is. So and my final recommendation is when the decision, we should move that line down a contingency for negotiation so it's not included in the fire department budget. Thank you.
Yep. We'll do that at the full board meeting.
Sure.
Can I ask a follow up, please?
Follow up, Alderman Kelly?
Yes, please. So would it be accurate to say that what was done this year, where we took money from SURF to cover, would not be a sustainable solution in the future?
Totally accurate, because the problem with taking money, okay, so right now, based upon the recommendations of the budget committee, there is zero money in the budget for the equipment, for purchase of equipment. So unless something else happens with surplus or something like that, no equipment. There'll be no equipment. I mean, that is not. And in addition to that, when you take money like a one-time, like equipment money, and use it to pay for operation, and if you plan to buy equipment the next year, you've got to replace the equipment money, and also then you don't have the equipment money to fund the budget. So really, you get hit with a double tax increase because you need to cover the money with tax money that you use from SURF the previous year. So let's say the number is 500,000. You take 500,000 SURF, you use it to fund an operating budget. Next year, you don't have, if you plan to buy equipment the next time, you don't have money from SURF. So now you've got to put in an additional 500,000 of property tax money just to get where you were, just to get up to the budget that you passed the previous year. Then on top of that, you have to add additional tax money for the increase that I anticipate you'll see in fiscal 22. So yes, it solves a little bit of a problem now, but it invites, and I'm just giving you my perspective, but it invites bigger problems later, and it results in a delay, but then a higher tax impact in like the next year. I hope that's I think that's understandable, but if I didn't articulate it clearly, I apologize.
I don't know if the 500,000 was to buy all of the equipment that SURF was buying this year, but SURF isn't broke. It has money in the account.
Sure.
We add money every year.
Yeah, but this year we're adding nothing. Now what we've done, there's a little bit of money in the account, but what we have done in prior years is we have sort of backfilled SURF with surplus money. And we might be able to do that, but again, we've already, but we're not sure. I mean, we probably can do it again, but, and so and 500,000 is way under budgeted to begin with. So it's not like that was a perfect budget. That alone is, not ideal. So we really should have $2-3 million of equipment purchase. And so we have done for several years now, we come up with a decent surplus and we allocate surplus money into SURF, and we probably can do that again. But, things are more uncertain than they were last year. And we don't know for sure what we're going to have for surplus. We could lose state revenue. The governor put out something today saying that, or somebody, the governor, the municipal association, the state, they've been saying the following, that the rooms and meals money is probably good for a year, but in terms of highway dollars, the road assistance that we get, that is tied to revenues from the gas tax, and that's likely to go down. So we may see a loss in revenue there. Now, not major. I think the number we get out of that is 1.4 million. But I'm just saying, there's only so much you can do in terms of funding operations with sort of the surplus and SURF and, all this kind of thing. I mean, basically, operations get paid for with tax dollars. And in the long run, that's the only way you can pay for it, because that's the only money that's always comes in.
Alderman O'Brien, you're on mute. Alderman O'Brien, you're on mute.
Thank you. I wasn't
Maybe legal had done that.
I wasn't intending to speak, but however, I forgot to mute button. But I do have a question on the step increases, and through the chair, if I can ask Mr. Griffin, when I was a member of the department, if somebody was hired in August, the step increases are only given out once a year, and that is in July. And when somebody gets hired with an anniversary date of August, then they would go basically 11 months without a step increase, and wouldn't get that next step increase until the July. So in theory, they'd be funding. And I just wonder if that is the same case, and if those numbers that he has brought up on the step increases reflective of the anniversary dates of the employees who may go through a period of time of not being funded.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the step increases are on a per firefighter basis. They average about 60,000 a year. And it's moving them through the steps. If you recall, the steps are every 5 years. They're not every year. That's my understanding, and they're all in the contract. They're all the contract is very long because there's a myriad of steps that are included in that. So there's no question if you were hired in at the beginning of the year, go through, you're going to get closer to your anniversary 5 years later. And if you came in halfway through the years with regard to fiscal budgeting, municipal fiscal year budgeting, it's not. I just leave everybody with the notion that it's not a material number, plus or minus, but it is a number that needs to be included in the costing because we're going to have to pay it out. People are going to get an increase when they reach those step years of service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, something new, Alderman Clemons?
Yeah, I just want to point out that, the mayor and I disagree on that point of the reconciling the budget. Nevertheless, I do understand the point that, eventually it catches up, but that's true of anything in the budget. So, they're going to go up no matter what. The budget's going to go up no matter what we do, unless we want to lay people off and cut services and things like that. The budget's going to go up. It's just an inevitable thing. The one point I just want to say is that, being an alderman all these years and just knowing what the surplus is in the city, I have never seen a city that has as much money in the bank as we do have so many problems funding different things. And it's just almost like an unwillingness to touch the savings account, which is there, in my opinion, for when times get tough. And in the next few years, starting right now, times are tough, and sometimes we need to look at different things that we've than what we've done in the past. So thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Did I mention the so-called savings, the unassigned fund balance? Of course, when I was an alderman, I always said, why are we holding so much money? Why do we need this? Mr. Fredette, Mr. Griffin would roll their eyes or whatever. And, so I continued to ask that question when I was elected mayor shortly thereafter, and we went down to see, it was Mr. Griffin, Mr. Fredette, Ms. Kleiner, I forget who else, and I went down to see the financial advisors. And Cinda I've forgotten her last name, but David could enlighten you. And they made a very strong case as to why this was critical with respect to the city's financial standing. And, it's sort of like, all right, do I really think we need this? Not really, but to satisfy the rating agencies, to look financially stable. This is what's required these days. And that's why we have a AAA bond rating, because we've got this money. One of the significant reasons is that we have this money in the bank. And they persuaded me that I should, just understand the importance of it, which, I came around to. So yes, I used to share Alderman Clemons' view, but I think if you spend time with the financial advisors, you think about how important the bond rating is and how much money we save in interest payments because we have a strong bond rating. If the bond rating went down, our interest payments would go up. You come around to the view of, well, it seems like it's an inevitable thing, but that's been my experience.
Mr. Chairman, just briefly. I share the mayor's opinion on this. I don't disagree that we need to have the unexpended fund balance, and I know exactly why we need it. And so I'm on the same page with him in everything he just said. But the point that I am trying to make is that we probably don't need all of it. And when we're talking about a couple of $100,000 to pay some employees, I think we can, figure out how to divert funds a different way so that the bond agency doesn't get mad at us. And the other point is, we might have to look at that fund balance in the future because we don't want to have major tax increases. And again, I'm not talking about rating it to the tune of millions of dollars, but if we have to dip into it a little bit, we should do so cautiously and for good reasons. But I just think this is a good reason. So, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing no one, would the clerk please call the roll on R20-041?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Clemons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
No.
Alderman Wiltshire,
No.
Alderman O'Brien votes present. Alderwoman Kelly,
No.
Alderman Dowd,
Reluctantly, no.
Mr. Chairman, the motion fails. There's 4 noes, 2 yeas, 1 voting present.
Okay, the motion will be referred to the Board of Aldermen with a negative recommendation. It could still pass at the full board level. It would need 10 votes because of the way it's structured. And we will see what happens. Again, 2 things. One, again, it takes 10 votes because we're unfunded supplemental appropriations. And also, it's the same night, the 23rd, we're going to be talking about the budget. And the contract and the budget are going to have to balance, or there are consequences each way. So just keep that in mind. All right. New business ordinances.
Mr. Chairman, we didn't vote on the motion.
Vote what?
We didn't vote on your motion.
Yes, we did. R20-041. That's what we just voted on.
We voted on my motion, which is to recommend final passage, but we did not vote on your motion, which was I don't know what your motion was.
I didn't know I made a motion.
We haven't disposed of the legislation, in other words. It's still before us.
If we need to do that, I'll make a motion that we refer R 20041 to the full board with a negative recommendation from budget.
Okay.
Seeing no one who wants to speak to it. Alderman O'Brien, you want to call the roll again?
Okay, is that a motion by the chair?
Yes.
Okay. Alderman Clemons,
No.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wiltshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien, votes present. Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Dowd,
Yes. So R 20041 will be forwarded to the full board with a negative recommendation. There will be opportunity at the full board level for further discussion and further deliberation. In order for it to pass, we would need 10 votes. If it passes, it will go to the mayor for action. And if it doesn't pass, then I believe it would go back to the fire commissioners. Mr. Griffin, I think that's correct, right?
I believe that's how it would work, but I think the mayor explained how that would work earlier. Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, now, new businesses. None. We don't need to address anything that was tabled in committee. General discussion? Anyone? No? Remarks by Alderman? Seeing none? You don't need a non-public. Alderman O'Brien,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn by roll call.
please call a roll.
Alderman Clemons,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Wiltshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien can vote on this one. Alderman Kelly, Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes, we're adjourned at 9:30 PM. Thank you, everyone.